Hello, everybody. It is episode 5 of the Mark Martin Archive podcast. I'm Charlie Marlow. There's Mark Martin. There is Matt Martin. Football season's over. We had the Super Bowl. And I remember you saying, Mark, once that you watch one football game per year, and it's a Super Bowl. So you watched last night, I take it?
I did. Watched my one and only game of the year.
And Matt, you're not so much of a football fan either, correct?
No, I didn't watch it. I will, like, if, I go over to some, buddies' houses or something like that, they got it on. But yeah, it was just me this weekend, so I didn't watch it.
And Mark and I, we were kind of joking before we started, but Mark, you said based on the last couple of years, let's be honest, the last couple of years, the Super Bowl hasn't been too great, but that doesn't mean we have to change the rules on all these sports, right? We've gone through that before with some other sports.
Yeah, we don't need to shorten the game in half, take 2 quarters away, and have a points reset at halftime. The game will be awesome again next year. I'm just sure of it. So let's all just be patient and heck, celebrate the dominance that we saw. That's the way you should do racing.
I don't know, Dad. I mean, don't you think it'd be more exciting if we, instead of a 100-yard field, we made it, cut it in half, made it 50? I mean, that would get, people like me, the casual fan that doesn't really watch, I'd tune in if it was a 50-yard field.
Absolutely. Yeah. They need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they need to cater to me.
Yeah. It'd make fans out of us casuals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love it. I love the not so subtlety right there. All right, but look, we all know once the Super Bowl is over, it's really officially NASCAR season and Daytona 500 season. So let's start there. And Mark, what, instead of calling it the World Center of Speed, you have a different nickname for Daytona International Speedway, right?
Certainly for me, it was the World Center of Pain. And so, yeah, I used that term, for the second half of my career, at least, if not more. That place dealt me a lot of pain.
So did you not like it because of the way things shook out performance wise, or did you actually, it wasn't one of your favorite tracks to race on, or a little bit of both?
So I raced there in 82, in 83, and then I came back in 88, and in 88 and 89, 90, it was still, even though the restrictor plates came in 88, it would still get slick enough on Sundays that it would be what I would call a real race, where you couldn't hold it wide open all the time. And, that makes a huge difference in how the race goes. Better handling cars and more brave and the craftsmanship of the drivers counts more if you have to let off the gas any at all. So we still had that, but as we went on into the 90s, the cars got closer together, the packs, it started to become pack racing. And once it became pack racing, then it was a demolition derby, and it has just progressed along that route. And it's just it wasn't any fun to me to be trying to win a championship and go to a race where you knew at least 50% of a chance of being in a wreck that you couldn't avoid and didn't cause. So, no, I didn't like it. I liked Talladega better. But, later on, Talladega became pretty much the same thing. There's a lot more room at Talladega. So it took longer for Talladega to become problematic with pack racing than it did Daytona. But the Daytona 500 is our crown jewel. and somebody wins it every year, and it's our crown jewel. So something I never won.
Yeah, so Charlie, you could cut this out if this is a little bit too controversial for people, but this is just a question for you, Dad, because I don't know, I guess being a kid and growing up with you, and you've never really liked Daytona, maybe it rubbed off on me a little bit, but I've never quite understood why the Daytona 500 is. I'll just be honest, I've never understood the hype for that race. I mean, maybe it's because I don't understand the history as much as I should, but to me, the Southern 500, I don't know why that isn't the crown jewel. I mean, I know it's a crown jewel race, but I don't know why people don't view the Southern 500 the way they do the Daytona 500. Because to me, it's the oldest. Darlington is the oldest track. It's much harder to win a race there and drive on than Daytona is, and there's no other track like it at all on the circuit. And it's in the heartland of NASCAR, the Carolinas. And in fact, I think when they built Darlington, the guy who built Darlington wanted to like make Darlington like NASCAR's Indy. And I don't know, like to me, like if you win the Southern 500, that's harder to do as a driver, you know, than winning the Daytona 500 after 1988. I'd say with the restrictor plates and all that.
You make all great points, and I don't disagree with any of it. I think that part of it is tradition and the history. When that racetrack was built in 59, 60, there, this thing was a monster. And it was, in the 60s, it was a massive, not that Darlington wouldn't, because they start nearly 100 cars at Darlington. And, the race was won by 13 laps, I think, one year. So Darlington was, but it was just viewed different. 2.5 miles was an absolute monster and a beast and a test of horsepower and engines, all up through the 60s and 70s. And I think that part of it is it just never, it has changed so much because the cars have outgrew it. The cars outgrew the racetrack in the mid 80s, where, and the way I say that is because they got to running 200, which was too fast for it to be safe for the fans.
Yeah.
And you know, and so it's never died out. The mystique has never died out from prior to when the cars really outgrew the racetrack. When you start having to restrict the cars from 900 horsepower to 400, 425, you got a problem. I mean, it's just a different race. And so, yeah, it's a different race, but it's still considered the crown jewel. And for some of that, I can't explain.
Yeah, I think you have, obviously it opens up the year. It is NASCAR's Super Bowl. We just had the Super Bowl. You have all the pomp and circumstance. And as you said, Mark, you still have the mystique, but let's be real. A lot of people have talked about some of the prestige, as you've discussed there, Matt, not being the same. We've heard Tony Stewart talk about this. We've heard Dale Jr. talk about this, where he said back in the day, you'd compare a Daytona 500 win to winning a championship. And you'd say, are they similar? And he said, look, I would never have that same thought nowadays. Just being honest here. So how do we get, because it's always going to be a cool event, but how do we get winning the race, winning the Daytona 500 to be that real legit crown jewel again? What can NASCAR do to get back there, you think?
If you want my opinion, I say it's impossible. I'm sorry. It's just racing has changed. Cars have changed. They're so freaking fast. I don't see any way. I don't see any way that you can make it the same kind of challenge. It's hard to win the Daytona 500 now, extremely hard, but you can also be lucky and win it way easier than you used to could. Used to, you had to flat out outrun everybody in the field, outrun and outlast. Now that outlast is important because that's the one thing that still is, is in play here, but you have to outlast the wrecks. I mean, there's so many potential winners that wreck out, and the cars are in a pack. The pack makes it exciting for the fans, especially the casuals, and it's never going away, and it will never be the same kind of challenge to win that race that it was prior to the mid 80s and prior, in my opinion.
Yeah, it just seems like, especially since 1988, that there's been quite a few lucky winners of the Daytona 500. Whereas, like, you think of the Southern 500, I mean, if you've won that race, like, the only people that got lucky that won that race, they were out front and it started raining because it rains a lot. But it's like, even the people that have won under when they, it's been called due to rain, like they usually had led the race for a while. So, I mean, there's very few Southern 500 winners that got lucky. There's quite a number of Daytona 500 winners that you could probably name that got lucky. But I mean, not to take that away from them, just I think it's a different race than it used to be ever since they put the restrictor plate on it. And as Dad said, as the technology progressed, it's just not, to me, I just never viewed it, even as a little kid, like the same that everybody else did, I guess.
One of the things about auto racing that is slowly going away is, and it has to. I'm not saying anything bad about it, but one of the things that is taking some of the lure away from auto racing is 40 years ago, it was who could build the biggest engine, who could make the most power, who could go the fastest, who could build the trickiest car. You can't do any of that now. The cars got too fast. You had to do something to contain it. The costs got too astronomical. You had to do something to contain it. All these things have changed motorsports in every form, not just NASCAR. It trickles all the way down to to local racing. I mean, how many local short tracks you pulled in and seen tractor trailers at? Dude, our first trailer was angle iron, wood, and house trailer axles we got for free. And goodness gracious, if you go to a big late model asphalt or dirt race, 100% are tractor trailer rigs. And so it's just all changed so much, and it's taking a lot of the ingenuity away, and so the lure toward it is diminished by all of that, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing we can do about it. The more rules you make, you know the harder it is to get through tech, the more people get thrown out of races, and if you take the rules away, then people get hurt, and only the rich survive it financially. So that's where we are today. And believe me, it's only going to get worse as we go forward.
I would think big picture, the chase coming back, we're going to have less late race wrecks. I'm not saying we're not going to have any, but with the no more winning you're in, we're going to have less. But I'm just thinking Daytona 500, though, I don't know how much that impacts it because 5 laps to go, 3 laps to go, it's still the Daytona 500. And, drivers are still going to get aggressive to try to win that crown jewel. So while I think big picture will probably have less craziness across the season, what do you guys think? Do you think it'll change how the Daytona 500 is actually raced this year?
I think very little. First of all, these guys are going to have to learn. They're going to have to hit their thumb with the hammer and go, ow. You know, it's gonna. Most of them are gonna have to learn the hard way, because in today's environment, you have to race so aggressively that you don't care if you wreck, and if you wreck now, it's going to cost you. But I think the Daytona 500 is such a big race, such a big event, that I think everybody's going to pretty much 100% race the same way as they did last year. And it's such a pack race. And when it comes down to the last, it starts about 50 to go, 50 laps to go, but at 30 to go, it really starts to get anxious, because the guys that are not in the front now know that their time is running out to get up there, and it begins to get really physical, and it's going to be exciting, and we're going to have a Daytona 500 champion, and he's going to have to survive. He's going to have to miss, all kinds of mishaps and survive the whole thing, and we should celebrate it. It is still the Daytona 500, and I think these guys they're going to be giving it hell.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think that, they want that win on their resume so bad that, the driving, is probably going to be the same as it always has been, at least for the past few years. But big picture, like you said, though, Charlie, they may probably will start to change, how they drive throughout the season, with the points being a little bit different now.
So with Daytona coming up this Sunday, we'll do our kind of mini season preview. Mark, do you think that the chase coming back, which drivers does that favor? And not just that, are there any drivers that you think 2026, for whatever reason, with their team or maybe with their maturation, that there's some drivers you're really looking at this year to make some statements?
I think that this chase format favors Chase Elliott and William Byron, Christopher Bell, incredibly consistent, good runner, very consistent. I'd like to see Bell get his whole team firing on all 8 cylinders. He is capable of doing even more than what he's done. I mean, he's amazing talent, and he's got an amazing team and operation behind him. But they're capable of more if they can just get that magic going. Carson Hocevar could and should win this year, and that's amazing for Spire to be able, to win on speed, and they've got it, and so I think he'll be exciting to watch. And I will watch with a lot of interest Corey Heim, because even though he's going to be part-time, he's an amazing talent and someone that's going to be fun to watch. Connor Zelwich is, he's a generational. Not very often do you have an AJ Foyt come along and 5 years later another AJ Foyt come along. We've had, we've been blessed with, with Kyle Larson. Connor is not in a Hendrick car, but he's going to be spectacular enough to be able to probably win this year. And if they can do that, then they may be able to beef that team up to where it can be, Hendrick level of equipment, because a lot of times a driver, not only what he does with his hands, but when he can deliver results and enthusiasm, other pieces of the puzzle seem to come together. So that's going to be interesting to watch as well. We really have. I'm extremely optimistic about what we get to watch this year. With those guys in Cup racing, Xfinity racing, the Truck Series, and ARCA. I have been enjoying ARCA more the last couple of years, seeing who has it and who doesn't. Uh, LeVar Scott is someone that I really think is good for our sport. His distinct personality, pretty darn aggressive, and really talented. And I'm happy to see him with Tommy Joe Martins and Team Alpha Prime, because they continue to improve. And it does my heart good to see, Tommy Joe, who was really a budget racing organization, be able to start, posting these top 15 finishes. And it would be great to see them continue to get more competitive. So much to watch this year. I'm really optimistic.
Yeah, you took my next question kind of, because the other day NASCAR put up this graphic and it was all the drivers who have never won a cup race. And I think it was after the Clash. Obviously, Ryan Preece won the Clash, but it wasn't a points race. But as I was looking at that graphic, I'm thinking, which drivers are going to get their first cup win? And Hocevar came to mind. I feel like Ty Gibbs also feels like he's due for a win potentially in 26. And then, as you mentioned, Zilich, I was thinking for Zilich, though, do you think it probably has to be a road course for him to get a win in 26?
It doesn't have to be, but it could. But it could be. He'll have to beat, SVG to get a road course win.
Yeah.
So that will be a challenge. It doesn't have to be a road course, but it more likely would be. Um, but it's going to be fun to watch. It's also fun to watch SVG to see if he continues to wrap his arms around. If he can get to be as good on an oval as he is on a road course, he's our next superstar for sure. So
Yeah, I mean, if he could just get you don't even really have to be that good. If he could just get where he's decent, like Mike could win, a race or two on an oval, a couple times a year. I mean, and then he wins pretty much all the road course races. I mean, he could rack up a lot of wins.
definitely.
And we're gonna talk about Ryan Preece here and the Clash. I know you guys have some great memories of the Clash and the Bud Shootout back in the day. But when we're talking about NASCAR, I always try to be very fair to NASCAR. And let's be real with this Clash. I mean, it's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, but they had a historic, we're talking, 100-year type winter storm. They had to move it. They moved it a couple times. Obviously, you had the crazy weather there. You had the cars off the track to refuel. They had to switch to FS2 from Fox. In the end, though, it was a great story with Ryan Preece winning the race, his first ever Cup win. Again, even though it wasn't a points race, I do think you got to give NASCAR a lot of credit for putting the show on. If you saw all the equipment and trucks they had there for a week, just move in snow just to get anything on there, NASCAR was really dealt a tough hand for the Clash this year.
Yeah, I saw a lot of crap talking about the whole thing, and I get some of it. January race in North Carolina is not a great idea. However, the race there in 2025, I thought, was a massive hit. It's historical. Now that may wear off. Uh, Certainly, they didn't have. They were dealt a terrible blow, and kudos to Stenhouse and a couple of the other drivers that went up there and shoveled snow out of the grandstands. I thought was pretty amazing. I've seen a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot you can say, bragging and kudos to the whole thing. There's plenty you can say, bad about it. That's fine. It was too long. The race was too long. They switched the coverage, TV coverage, which was really a bad move for the fans. There were plenty to gripe about, but kudos to NASCAR for even taking the race up there. I don't know where it goes in the future. I'd like to see it at some other short tracks. But one of the short tracks that comes to mind, two things. One, doesn't have safer barriers, which doesn't bother me on a short track, but it does them. I get that, understand it, although it doesn't bother me. I wouldn't mind racing on a short track without one, but safer barrier. But if they happen to pan to the stands, that wouldn't be a good look for Fox, network television. So there's a lot of things you have to think about. Everybody just like, oh, just put it here, put it there. Man, there's a lot of things to consider. I'd love to see it at New Smyrna Speedway. But, I don't see that happening. I don't see how you could possibly do it, but I wish it was there.
Yeah, it seems like NASCAR is doing so many things the last 2, 3, 4 months to kind of go back, to try to get back to the glory days of NASCAR. And whether you believe in something religious or fate or the weather, it kind of did seem like this storm, in a way, was kind of just this message. And maybe it's not next year, but it was kind of this message. Maybe just go back. Maybe go back to Daytona for a while. You're going back in so many other instances in NASCAR. Maybe you should go back for the clash, for the shootout there too.
I mean, weather-wise, it would definitely make sense to race further down south. I mean, but this isn't like a new thing with NASCAR. I mean, way back in, early 90s, I mean, they were racing, second race of the year, Richmond, I mean, in February. So, the race Dad won in 1990, I believe that still holds the record for the coldest NASCAR race ever. And so it's like, I don't know why, you'd want to race that far up north, that early in the year, but they would. But, in 93, it was the spring Atlanta race where they had that blizzard. So, I mean, wild stuff can happen even down south, but I don't know. I would think if I was NASCAR, I'd want to be, racing further south, especially in January and February.
Well, a lot of the sentiment is take it back to Daytona. Well, I get that. I just want to remind people that I wasn't one of them, but there were a lot of fans that complained about the race at Daytona. So, I mean, sometimes I hate when people complain because sometimes you get something that's, not worse. It's just like the Super Bowl. If you said, I'm never going to watch the Super Bowl again because I didn't think that was a good game, well, that'd be short-sighted. Just keep coming back. You're going to see one of the greatest games you ever saw one of these years coming up. And racing's the same way. You have boring races, you have mediocre races, and some you just have that are over the top. So, I think the sentiment is to take it back to Daytona, but I also agree with taking it to a short track because if it's a little short track, it gets physical, gets everybody's blood pumping. The one thing you have to remember is this is a exhibition race. And Matt brings this up all the time. It was an exhibition race in the 90s. And you did different rules for that race. And you raced it different than you did the regular races. And it should be. You don't forget it's exhibition. So if you do some clown stuff or, some goofy stuff or some gimmicks, okay, it's for a lot of money. And by the way, we got to watch some racing. midweek racing, even at that, because of the weather. And I thought it was cool. I was so ready for racing season to start. It seems like the longest off season ever this off season.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes folks think that people are always complaining about NASCAR, and I get that. And sometimes the loudest people on social media, they are the folks complaining. But then I'll look, and you could have a tweet or a video, and only 1% of the people are even commenting, and only a few of them are complaining. Most people are watching that video and enjoying it. With the Clash, though, I thought it was really cool. First of all, Ryan Preece winning, modified guy. He speaking of complaining, he drops the F-bomb, and a couple people were mad about that. I loved it because look, it was passion, and you can say it's not a points race. That mattered to that dude. He was almost crying there. I mean, that's again, it's not a points race. That was his first NASCAR Cup win. That was genuine emotion after the race. I thought that was really cool.
I do too. I love that he dropped it. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, but it was genuine, and it was the core base. Look, the majority of the core base swears, okay? And that was, he didn't plan that. It just flew out his mouth because he was so damn excited. And, of course, I was excited for him. That made up for some of the stuff that was disappointing, like the race being too long, the TV coverage changing, and the gas thing. That was a tough call to have two cars, fall out of contention because they were short of gas, but then they realized everybody was going to be short of gas. So then they gave everybody a chance to gas. Those were little fumbles. But for me, it was all made up for with this great winner. And overall, it was a fantastic show. I think it was awesome that it rained and sleeted. I think it was a better show because they had to put on rain tires, wet weather tires. All of that together was, I mean, dude, Thursday, I was in a great mood. I had seen a great race. I saw a guy that I really pull for win a race. I saw him be really real with his language, and he didn't get penalized for it, which was there are so many things. If you want to look at NASCAR right now, there's so many little bitty wins and little bitty positives. Oh yeah, they got lots of problems, and we can talk about those all day. But there's so many little wins that looks like they're turning the corner in the right direction. And as far as Ryan goes, don't get this twisted about me being, partial to a guy who builds his own cars. That's just a saying. Ryan didn't build his cup car. Ryan didn't build the frame on his late model that he's trying to race, that he never raced late models before, really. He got a car and he bought the pieces and he put them together and he did the work himself. He has built modified cars and has those in his shop. And, he's a car guy. He's the most car guy you can have in NASCAR racing today. You can't get, a guy that would be any more of a car guy than that. And I don't begrudge anybody who's never touched a race car other than the driver's compartment. That's the day and age we live in. And it's still really hard, but it's cool to see a guy who gets his hands dirty, that wins the race, goes home and gets in his motorhome and drives all night to New Smyrna to race. He's racing two divisions. His dad's brought a modified for him to race. He raced a modified. He's got that late model that he built for the Snowball Derby. He raced that. I mean, he's racing every night. I mean, we like to see that once in a while.
Yeah, it was really cool to see Ryan win. He's ran, really well in that car. And it got me to thinking that would be the very first Cup victory. I mean, I know it's not a points race, but a win in the Cup Series for the RFK or Roush, number 60, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah. Now that car is running before, right, in the Cup Series before I thought that like in '98 or something they put Matt Kenseth in the 60 for a race. I thought it ran before the last couple of years.
It probably has. I don't have that on my radar screen, but one of the things that you bring up, Matt, is that's their first Clash uh, win in 27 years.
Okay, yeah. So was the last time they won it when you won it in 1999?
As far as I know,
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, but that I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that won it.
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't researched it, but I thought I saw a comment like that. Um, but it might not be true. You had some really good Daytona racers with Kenseth and what Biffle and Burton and all those guys. Um, so I'm not really sure Bush as well, but I think it was. I saw that somewhere. It was pretty damn cool for everyone to be able, within the organization to get the win. It's huge relief for that kid. He has bet his whole life on being able to be successful, and it ain't been easy for him. And he's had dark times, and he's a racer, and he never quit racing and never gave up on racing. And hopefully, he gets a points race this year too.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to see.
Well, Matt and Mark, that 1999 Bud Shootout win. Matt, I know you wanted to talk about that, and you had a bunch of stories also about the 1999 season, which wraps into some more discussion of the Daytona 500 as well. So I'll toss it to you there.
Yeah, so Ryan winning, made me think of you winning the '99 Bud Shootout at Daytona, and that was a big deal for you because your history at Daytona did not like racing there. I mean, do you have any memories or recollection from that race? I mean, it had to feel good to win, knowing your history there.
Yeah, it was really pretty special. I don't remember where we started from, but um, if you look at the history of my starts and all those shootouts or clash, in my mind, I start on the last row every race because you draw, and I am without question way less lucky than anybody else. Or the year that I did draw the front row, I had the slowest car in my history down there. So, I never seemed like I had a good start. Was always a real challenging race. And it's funny you ask, this is going to freak people out, but you ask about my memories of it. The memory I have of that race is you remember 1997 at Talladega when we won the caution free race and I ran the qualifying shocks. And they were Bilsteins because the Penske's rode rougher than the Bilsteins at the same force. So I felt like they might handle better on the long run because they didn't jerk the cars bad. Well, in '99 for the shootout, I had a mild version of those uh, Bilsteins on there. So that's what I remember. Uh, and of course, I remember winning the race. Afterwards and going to victory lane, it being a big relief. It had been over 10 years, and I hadn't been in contention to win hardly anything there up until that point. So it was cool.
Yeah, I remember, being in Victory Lane with my cousin Austin and mom and everything. So it was really neat. That's what I recall from it. But so how much different was your setup in the race? Do you recall for the 500 compared to the Bud Shootout?
And it's funny. I don't remember. I don't know. I don't remember running those shocks in the 500, but they were a milder version, so they didn't ride as rough. We were still, the racetrack was still really rough in '99. So, we were very much tuned into handling. So I think we used more of a handling shock for the 500. Uh, Spring wise and all would have been the same. It would have been just a two. So we had that race, and then we would have the 125 or 150 mile the duels on Thursday, and the racetrack after the duels becomes much more slick than the Sunday before the 500. Like the shootout was always run the Sunday before the 500, and the racetrack wasn't slick back then, and it was a lot about speed and less, very much less about handling. But by the time Thursday rolls around, the racetrack and all the activity by then would be getting it slick, and so Thursday you would figure out that your car didn't handle good enough, and you'd spend Friday and Saturday trying to get it to handle better without sacrificing speed. So, we may have tuned weight distribution or a little bit of something like that to try to get the car to handle better, but I don't remember the details.
So I rewatched part of the 1999 Daytona 500 this morning, and let's see if this jogs your memory a little bit. So looked like you were, running pretty good. Stayed in the top 10 for most of the race, it seemed. And then with about 25 laps to go, you got caught up in a big wreck. Does that sound like your typical Daytona 500?
Yeah, which year?
Yeah,
That sounds like most years.
yeah, yeah. To me, that was your typical Daytona 500, at least in the six car.
Yeah, I, in early on when it was more of a handling race, you know, I, uh, I had other bad luck. We lost engines one year when they dropped the jack to leave the pits. I sheared the pinion right off right off, sheared it right off. Like the car didn't move; it just revved up and just broke the gear off. I don't know how you do that, but it happened to me, and I remember, waiting for them to change the gear in the car and looking out there at the cars running and just thinking, man, I should be out there. But a lot of times it was the wrecks. I couldn't believe the 500 back then was so much longer. There was so much attrition, like not wrecks. I'm talking about engine failures, rear end failures, electrical failure. Oh, there was more attrition back then. And you'd be watching a race knowing that my car was a seventh place or 10th place car, and you'd see almost all of those guys that were better than you fall out of the race. And you're thinking, yeah, if I could have just stayed in this thing, you know? But yeah, it was just really frustrating. And it therefore got the World Center of Pain name for me.
Do you remember when you coined that term, when you started using that term exactly?
I don't. It was accumulation of,
Yeah.
defeats at Daytona that have just, I just, I wasn't fast enough, would go down there and test for 3 days and not have speed and go home and go back. And it just felt like I was taking a spanking every time I went down there.
Probably my favorite Daytona 500 story of yours is the 1990 Daytona 500. Do you want to tell that story? Where you drank the cup of coffee before the
Oh,
race?
oh yeah. So 1990 was the first year I was sponsored by Folgers, and I wasn't really a coffee drinker uh, at all. And I had hospitality, and went to the, Folgers hospitality tent, meet and greet people and stuff. And I had a cup of coffee. and that was unique for me. And during the race, I needed to go to the bathroom. So always the last thing I did after intros would go straight to the porta john, and hit it right before we went to climb in the car. That was my ritual routine. And I had done that, but oh my God, I needed to go so bad. I was in pain. Uh, would have been happy to just go right in my seat, but I couldn't because it's just too much intensity. You couldn't. Oh lordy! So anyway, we finished the race, and back then, um, we went into what was at that time the Bush garage and went around then to the Cup garage. And so as soon as I went through the gate where the Bush garage was, of course, the Bush cars were gone. There were porta johns right there at that gate. And I knew that from because I'd run the Bush car too, and I was back and forth. So I knew where. So I parked right there in front of the porta johns, got out, and I went in the porta john and used the bathroom. And it seemed like it took 15 minutes because I was still in so much pain that I still couldn't relax. And yeah, that was a lesson learned. I never drank a cup of coffee again ever in my career before a race.
Well, you wouldn't even drink like any fluids like 2 hours or so before a race, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just I stayed hydrated all the time until race day morning. And then race day morning, I started to restrict so that I could get through the race without having to go. But then I did hydrate during the race. So it wasn't like I would get dehydrated because I would hydrate during the race. And as you sweat, that really changes how much you have to when you sweat as much as we did back then. I would lose, you know 7 pounds. I weighed 120 and would lose 7 pounds, 8 pounds, and that was all fluid. And so a lot of times you didn't need the urge to go in the car because you were sweating so much.
So getting back to 1999, when you guys came back to Daytona for the July race, you got injured in happy hour and pretty bad. Why don't you tell us about that?
So yeah, it was the final practice on Friday. Um, Final practice, and I had a really good car. I thought I had a better than usual car down there. The car was driving really good, and I was out there in the pack, and then I had dropped back to toward the back of the pack because I was going to come in. I did that on the front straightaway because I was going to run down the backstretch. Jack always liked a clean cut, which is running wide open and then shut it off. And that way he could read the spark plugs. So I was going to run wide open down the backstretch and then shut it down and come in. Well, when I went into one, the right front blew. And I was running middle of the track, so I wasn't running the high side. And I hit the wall hard. I mean, you wouldn't think it, but it was one of the more brutal hits. And the car just stayed in the wall and just grinded. It broke the brake rotor and everything, and so it just grinded to a halt on the early part of the backstretch. It went all the way through turn two and out onto the backstretch. And I got out right away. And as soon as my foot hit the ground, I got dizzy. I mean, dizzy, like I was afraid I might fall down. I still didn't think anything of it. I just thought, man, I took a beating here. But, then I started feeling the pain in my wrist and in my knee. So, of course, they took me to the infield care center. I didn't complain about my knee, uh, but I did my wrist. They X-rayed the wrist, and I heard them in there talking. They were in the other room analyzing the X-ray, and my heart sank into my stomach. I said, "Yeah, it's broken." And so they come in there, and I already knew what they were going to tell me. So we put a splint on it, which was just a plastic thing, under my palm and up to here, and then they wrapped it up, and that was that. Um, and so I went back to the coach, and of course I was going to race Saturday night. That was Friday afternoon or Friday night. And of course, I was going to race Saturday. So, the guys get the backup car ready and start her in the back. And, don't run as good as I would like to. And I'm really, 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 really miserable. By the way, I also did, fracture a rib too, which is really painful, but there's nothing you can do about it. So between my rib and my wrist, which was hurting, I couldn't grip the steering wheel right with that splint on, and it was my wrist was killing me trying to hold the steering wheel, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And I'm pretty grumpy at this time in my career. By the '90s, I'm grumpy all the time, but extremely grumpy when things aren't going well and I'm not running good enough and I'm in serious pain. So I'm like, give me a pair of scissors on the next caution. And so I come in, pit, they hand me a pair of scissors, and I cut that splint off. And then I'm like, what I do with the scissor? Because I cut it off after the pit stop. So I drive out. So I'm on the racetrack, on caution, cutting this thing off. I cut it off. And then I'm like, what do I do with these scissors? Well, I don't want to throw them over there, because then they'd be flopping around in the car. I can't have that. I got to put them. So I stuck them underneath my legs, underneath my seat.
Oh my God, man.
Well, that's the best thing I can figure out what to do with them.
Yeah.
And so I did, and ground it out. I think I finished 17th, which some people think was pretty good under the circumstances, but I thought it was horrendous. But yeah, that was the story. I finished the race with the scissors under me in my seat. So, and there's more to the story. So damn if my knee didn't hurt more on Sunday, and he hurt even more on Monday. So finally, I told Benny Ertel that worked for me, because he knew all the doctors. He knew the doctor that actually wound up doing my back fusion. And so he got a MRI lined up on Tuesday, because this knee is the problem. It ain't my wrist. And so we go get an MRI, and on Wednesday morning I load Matt up in the quarter midget and a couple of boys that work for me, and we go to the quarter midget track in Orlando to test. Orlando's an hour from Daytona, or a quarter midget track is, at least. And so we're out there testing, and I'm hobbling around. This thing's hurting. And I get a phone call. My phone rings. It's Benny. Mark, Dr. Comer wants you to go straight to the hospital. Now, you got your knees broke. And so, I had to pack up and head for the hospital. I went to the hospital, and that was Wednesday afternoon. They put a screw in the tibula plateau. And if you thought it was sore on Wednesday, you should have seen how bad it hurt on Thursday. This was one of the most painful things I'd ever done. And Arlene wasn't very proud of my decision. But of course, Thursday, the next day, I get on my plane and go to New Hampshire for the race. And she didn't go. So I went up there, took Benny with me, and I went up there and stayed in the motorhome by myself on crutches, couldn't walk, in magnificent pain. And Friday morning, I go up to the garage area, and the boys have to lift me in the car for practice, and they push it out of the garage, and I put it in first gear, and I started in first, and I right foot brake in practice, and never use the clutch. I don't use the clutch at all. So I started in gear and drive it off, and we do our practicing. And then it was time for qualifying, and NASCAR wouldn't let Benny drive me. If you know where the garage area is in New Hampshire, well, qualifying, you left at the end of pit road, the other end of the racetrack. It was about a half a mile, and they wouldn't let Benny take me down there on a golf cart. So I had to walk down there to go qualify. And I remember that being the most painful, one of the most painful weekends. That Friday was. I got through practice on Saturday, and then on Sunday I used it for the clutch, uh, and did the clutch. But I guess we ran okay. There again, not spectacular, but we didn't lose. I was chasing a championship. I wasn't going to ever give up a spot, much less a race. And so we did it. And we got better after a while, but years later, damn thing started hurting again. And I went and saw Comer, and he said, "Dang, that screw's backing out." So they took the screw out then at that point. But whoever has a screw put in their bone and it backs out? Only me, I guess. I don't know. It's pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, yeah, it's pretty wild, man. And after that Daytona race, as far as your finishes go, if you just look at them on paper, I mean, you wouldn't think that your injuries really affected your performance that much. But I mean, I would think that they certainly had to, at least the next couple races. But you still had good finishes. But what's so surreal to me though is when you watch those clips back, is that all the commentators are bragging on you, like they're hyping up that you're hurt and injured, and that your guys have to put you in the car and take you out. And it's like, that is, dude, today, like that's just night and day, man. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, NASCAR wouldn't even let you race if that happened today. I mean,
Yep.
now you would be forced to take off, but it's just totally different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just amazing that how he lived. I mean, it wasn't just me. I mean, Ricky Rudd, pulling his eyelids up because they were so swollen. I mean, that's just what you did. That's just what you did back then. Nobody missed a race for any reason, unless it was really a bad break. I mean, you had Kyle Petty and Darrell Waltrip have serious broken legs, where they didn't race. But even what was almost 20 years before that, when in my late model, when I broke my left foot and ankle in four places, I raced again in 30 days, and I had to put a hand clutch in the car, so that I could do pit stops. So it just was a different era, and that's one of the things that's interesting for our fans to listen to today, is because if you think 1999 was a wild era, you should look at 1969, before my time. I mean, these guys drove these cars that were, I mean, the cars were not safe in 99 at all, especially for the speed. But gosh, in 1969, it was insane. It was all about how fast can we make this car go, and no attention at all really given to safety.
All right, awesome stories there. We're right at an hour. So unless you guys got anything else, I was thinking also, do you guys want to do picks? Do you want to do a pick for the Daytona 500? Looking right now at DraftKings, the odds, Denny Hamlin is the favorite at plus 900. And then you have William Byron, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. They would be the second favorites. Then you got Logano. Kyle Busch is actually right up there. Austin Cindric, Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, Alex Bowman, Ryan Preece, Chase Briscoe. Those are like your top 10 or 12 favorites according to the sports books. Do you guys got anybody that you're thinking is going to win this thing?
Matt, you go first.
Man, Daytona 500. I mean, that's just like, it's a wild card, man. You just have no idea, really. But I would say who I would like to see win the most. I mean, I like, a lot of those guys, but I mean, for sure, Denny Hamlin with everything that's happened, but also, Kyle Busch. I mean, he needs a win, and to win the Daytona 500 for him, that would be great. So one of those two guys I'd like to see win.
I'm with you, Matt, on both those guys. But we may have a surprise. It would be incredible if Corey LaJoie could win the race in a RFK car.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys stole mine. I was going to say Kyle Busch. I was surprised his odds were that high. And then this one, I mean, heck, he's almost the favorite. I feel like just looking, Ryan Blaney jumped out to me. Ryan Blaney. Yeah. So I'll pick Blaney just because you guys already picked Kyle Busch there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see Ryan win too, man, for sure.
That'd be awesome. All right, well, Daytona 500 is here. NASCAR season is officially here. Great show. This was awesome. Episode 5 of the Mark Martin Archive podcast. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next week after the Daytona 500 from the World Center of Pain.
All right.
Thank you, guys.